If you're being approached by an aggressively looking dog, start yelling and screaming. It'll show your dominance and spook the animal off. Yes, this is a widespread myth, and no, it won't help you if you meet a canine that looks as if it's going to attack you. The best course of action in this rather scary situation is to stand still and avoid direct eye contact with the animal. You shouldn't run. It may only encourage the dog to start chasing you. If the animal attacks, drop to the ground and curl into a ball, protecting your head and neck with your hands. But what if you come across another, much more dangerous representative of the canine family? A wolf? Running away won't save your life. Wolves are much faster than humans, especially in the forest. Plus, as soon as you start running, the wolf's prey drive will immediately kick in. Instead, maintain eye contact with the animal at all times and never ever turn your back on it. While trying to escape, make sure the wolf remains in front of you. If the predator ends up behind you, its hunting instincts may come into play, so slowly back away while facing the animal. You might have heard that if you've been bitten by a snake, you should apply garlic to the bite area. Another misconception. Garlic has absolutely no effect on snake venom. Instead, try to remember the color and shape of the snake. It can later help doctors treat the bite and figure out what anti-venom is needed. Also, remain still and as calm as possible. It can slow down the spread of venom. And, of course, immediately seek medical help. If you see a bear, fall down on the ground and pretend to have passed away. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work this way. First of all, you need to show the animal that you're not prey. Do not make any high-pitched noises and don't scream. This way, you may agitate the bear even more. If you wave your arms, do it slowly. If you decide to talk some sense into the bear, do it in a calm and low voice. Without taking your eyes off the bear, start to move sideways. It won't let you trip and go down. Do not rush or run away. Although at first sight, bears may look clumsy and heavy-footed, they're surprisingly good runners. Plus, these animals love chasing their prey. That's why if a bear charges after you, stop moving altogether. There's a misconception that bees can only sting once. But in reality, the problem is that honeybee stingers are barbed and can easily catch on their victim's skin. The stinger gets stuck. The bee can't free itself and doesn't usually survive such an accident. You need to remember that bees will protect their hives no matter what. And they can sting you even if you're just walking by. Dark colors can make bees more aggressive, since such hues make people look like their natural enemies. That's why if you're dressed in a black t-shirt, your chances of being stung by these insects are higher. If a swarm of bees is following you, hide in an enclosed or dark space. The lack of proper lighting will throw the insects off your track. Similar rules apply to wasp encounters. One of the worst mistakes you can make is wearing your long hair down and wearing dark clothes. Wasps are attracted to dark moving objects, and your clothes and hair certainly fit this description. So if you suspect you may come across some wasps, put on some light-colored clothes and keep your hair tied up in a ponytail or bun. Contrary to popular belief, bathing a wasp sting in vinegar or baking soda won't help. Instead, apply some ice to the affected area. Gorillas are called the kings of the jungle, and not without a reason. They are leaders that tend to protect their family and land. They won't normally attack you if you behave obediently. So, upon meeting a gorilla, sit down. This way, you won't look large and threatening, towering over the animal. Try not to make loud noises and avoid direct eye contact. In case of an attack or approach, curl into a ball. Gorillas are proud animals. As a rule, they won't attack the weak and defenseless. Surprisingly, a wild kangaroo can pose a serious threat to a person. But it will only happen if you enter the animal's territory and it feels threatened. To avoid a conflict, cough. It's not a joke. Your coughs should be short and quiet. The kangaroo will consider it a sign of disease, and there's a chance it won't attack you. After that, back away slowly. This way, you will look smaller, therefore less threatening. Don't turn away and run. It will only provoke the animal. Remember that kangaroos are perfect jumpers, capable of catching up with you in a few moments. Of course, we must talk about sharks. The good news is that out of several hundred shark species existing on Earth, only about a dozen attack humans. If a shark gets interested in you, it will be extremely hard to break away. To not attract sharks, prevent blood or any other body fluids from getting into the water, sharks can feel smells at great distances. Also, when you go swimming, take off shiny jewelry or other reflective objects. Sharks are attracted to shiny things because they mistake them for fish scales. Don't turn your back on this predator and don't try to escape in panic. You will look like prey this way. Move slowly. Hitting the animal in its eyes and gills can only make it angrier and more determined to attack. Instead, start making bubbles. They're too noisy for sharks, and these animals don't like them. If you encounter a wild boar, it'll be a mistake to try to escape the animal by jumping into the water. Boars are actually good swimmers and can easily follow you if they feel threatened. Instead, start whistling or singing if you spot a wild boar walking nearby. If you've encountered a lion, maintain eye contact with the animal. Don't turn your back and don't move your eyes away. It will give the predator some time to attack. Try to look more massive than you actually are. Lift your arms and jack it up. If you look big and threatening, the animal will try to avoid the confrontation. Speak to the lion in a reasonably loud and confident voice. Such behavior isn't typical for a victim. You will baffle the predator, and it will perceive you as an irritating presence, which is better to stay away from. Elephants are clever and quite friendly animals, but they have been known to attack people. This is especially true about female elephant mothers with babies. If you have come across an elephant, pay attention to its body language. If the trunk is curled and the ears are pulled back, it means it might try to attack and crush you. If the animal approaches, don't run. Try to find something to serve as a barrier between you and the elephant. It can be a stone or a tree. Rhinoceroses have bad eyesight. That's why it's easy to frighten them and provoke them to attack. These animals' speed can reach 37 miles per hour, which is why it's really difficult to outrun them. The most foolproof way to escape from a rhinoceros is to hide behind a tree. It's a serious obstacle for the animal. Also, it's unlikely to follow you through bushes or high grass. Hippos may seem cute, but this image is very misleading. These animals can be extremely dangerous. Despite their weight, hippopotamuses can run at a speed of 18 to 28 miles per hour. Plus, it's quite easy to make them angry. So if the weather's hot, try not to come close to bushes. The level of water lowers during the drought season, and hippos hide in tall grass. To make the animal leave you alone, climb a tree, a rock, or a steep hill. Wait there until it goes away. Despite the widespread opinion, bulls react to movement, not the color red, or any other color. That's why if a bull is running at you, stay straight and still. Use your hat, t-shirt, or other clothes you have at hand as bait. When the bull runs up close enough, throw this object as far away from you as possible. The bull will change the direction and follow this new target.
The liger is probably the most popular hybrid animal and an incredibly large cat. You won't see them in the wild. People most deliberately breed them. Lions and tigers don't even inhabit the same areas. So, a liger is a mix of a male lion and a female tiger, and they can grow to be very big in a pretty short period of time. They're actually the biggest cats in the world. Hercules, the largest recorded liger, is a real example of that. 922 pounds and 10.8 feet long. Imagine taking him for a walk. Ligers are mostly way bigger than either of their parents. In most cases, they behave and look more like lions than tigers. But they have some tiger traits too. For example, striped backs, and they're crazy about swimming. The taigen. Nobody could fault you for thinking the taigen and liger are basically the same animal. I mean, they're both a combination of tigers and lions. But a taigen comes from a crossbreeding of a male tiger and a female lion. They're usually smaller than their parents, and definitely much smaller than their giant, could you call them siblings? In most cases, they inherit charming looks from their tiger fathers, but they get some interesting traits from their mother's side too. For example, love for socialization and the ability to roar. Hands down, one of the rarest hybrid animals in the world are wolphins. These fellas are a mashup of a female bottlenose dolphin and a male false killer whale. Its name might make you think differently, but a false killer whale belongs to the dolphin family. They're not even related to killer whales. Wolphins are such an interesting 50-50 mix and balance of their parents. They have dark gray skin, the perfect blend of a black false killer whale and light gray dolphin skin. Dolphins have anywhere between 80 and 100 teeth. False killer whales have 44, and their hybrid young is halfway, with 66 teeth in total. What would it look like if algae and a slug paired? No need to imagine. You have a green sea slug to check the result. It lives in salt marshes in Canada and New England, and it's possibly the weirdest hybrid creature you'll see in this video, and in general. Part plant, part animal. So, some slugs seem to have been very sneaky while stealing the genes from innocent algae that they have eaten to enable them to look like this. Since they're partially a plant, they can produce the plant pigment called chlorophyll. That means these unusual slugs can even photosynthesize. That's the process plants use to turn sunlight into energy. So they produce their own molecules that contain energy without having to eat anything at all. When scientists first discovered it, a green sea slug was the first case of a multicellular animal that's able to produce chlorophyll. What do you get when you mix a male leopard and a female lion? You get an interesting hybrid called a lepin. These animals grow to be almost as big as lions, but they still have shorter legs, similar to their father leopard. They inherit some of his other traits too, like a love for climbing and swimming. You can have a union with a male lion and a female leopard too, and the result is called a leopard. Male lions are usually around 10 feet long and weigh about 500 pounds. The female leopard is way smaller, only 5 feet long, with a weight of about 80 pounds. The difference in size here is too big, so this pairing really doesn't happen that often. Okay, how about a buffalo and a cow? When you were little, maybe you thought that they could be a good match, but in reality, the combination creates an unusual hybrid animal called a beefalo. Not many types of hybrid animals can reproduce on their own, but a beefalo can do it. When a grizzly and a polar bear get together, it results in a growler bear, or grizzly bear, or grizzlar, whichever you like the most. You can see them even in the wild. These two types of bears have a mutual contempt for one another. Yep, they're not good at living together in a mutual habitat. But even though it's rare, the love can still happen and result in these cute caramel-colored hybrid growler bears. In most cases, they'll be a bit smaller than polar bears, on average 60 inches tall at the shoulder, and approximate weight 1,000 pounds. But they're well equipped for surviving in warmer climates, thanks to the genes they got from their grizzly family side. Now let's get to one pretty tough fella, the jag lion. As its name implies, it's the hybrid of a jaguar and a lion. We don't know much about these intriguing big cats because only a few of them exist. But there was an unintentional mixing between a black jaguar and a lioness, which eventually resulted in 2 jag-lion cubs. One had a dark gray coat with black spots because of the dominant melanin gene black jaguars usually have. The other one had a lion color and the rosette pattern spots that remind you of a jaguar. Yep, you already know it. There are also liguars, a hybrid of a female jaguar and a male lion. That's some colorful family. Speaking of wild cats, have you ever heard of a savanna cat? Savanna cats are in both categories of house pets and exotic hybrids, since they're a mix of a domestic cat and a wild African serval hybrid animal. We're talking about striking animals, almost as big as a domestic cat. But what gives them their exotic look are their tall bodies, slender forms, and spotted coats. These cats are extremely loyal, intelligent, and loving creatures. Here's one unexpected mixture: a zebroid. Technically, it's a name people use to describe a hybrid of a zebra and any equine species. But when you pair a zebra and a horse, their young is called a zorse. Zebra hybrids mostly look like whichever animals they've been crossbred with, but with the striped coat of a pure zebra. Most of these hybrid creatures don't even have fully striped coats. You can mostly see the stripes on non-white areas of their bodies and legs. Speaking of zebra hybrids, check out this adorable creature. It's called a zonkey, or zedonk, zebras, zenki. Take your pick. They're mostly either tan, gray, or brown in color. You'll distinguish them by unique stripes that are darkest on their legs and belly. Unlike some hybrids, such as the liger, zonkies can normally live in the wild. In fact, that's where you can find them, living life to the fullest across savannas and open woodland, mostly in Africa. Can you guess what a geep is? Yep, a combination of goat and sheep, and definitely one of the most adorable and cuddliest hybrid creatures in this video. Geeps are very rare. Some experts even believe it's possible that they're not true hybrids, but just sheep with certain genetic abnormalities. After all, sheep and goats do carry different numbers of chromosomes, which means cross-species mixes are almost impossible. When a camel and a llama get together, you get a cute little thing called a kama. Similar to beefalo, the kama also produces the best economic traits of both its parents. The first one was born in 1998. Kamas don't have camel humps. Their body is covered in soft, fleecy fur, similar to their llama side of the family. They can drink big amounts of water at a time, so they can survive with almost no water at all for pretty long periods. The coy wolf is a hybrid where nothing looks that unusual to most people, since the coyote and the wolf are not that drastically different in their looks. After all, these two species only diverged around 200,000 years ago. Now they're still able to mate and bring coy wolf cubs to the world. People living in eastern Canada and the US might be familiar with these smart, adaptable animals that inhabit their forests, neighborhood parks, or sometimes even cities. These hybrids have emerged over the past century or so, and they've picked up the characteristics of both their parents. When a coy wolf is fully grown, it's somewhere in between the size of both parents, but it's also 55 pounds heavier than pure coyotes and has a bigger jaw, longer legs, smaller ears, and a bushier tail. Check out the narluga, an extremely rare creature whose parents are a narwhal and a beluga whale. It's a pretty strange animal, but far from being lonely, they mostly live in the North Atlantic. Scientists had suspected their existence for decades. In 1990, they found an unusual-looking whale skull located in an Inuit hunter's tool shed in Greenland. People from that area said that there were other similar-looking animals, and they fit the description of neither a beluga whale nor a narwhal. People said they had gray skin, narwhal-like tails, and beluga-like flippers. Narwhals and beluga whales are similar in size, and they share a family, the Monodontidae family. So it may not even be that surprising that they're able to successfully breed in the wild.
What do Paris Hilton and Chris Hemsworth have in common? Well, apparently, they both want to bring animals back to life. But we're not talking about making your favorite pet live forever. Nope. These celebs are actually helping a science company bring back animals that no longer exist, like the mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and even the iconic dodo. If everything goes according to plan, these fascinating creatures could be walking among us again by 2028. This groundbreaking effort is led by a company called Colossal Biosciences. At this very moment, they're working on a way to revive the core genes of animals that disappeared from Earth ages ago. The idea is to replicate those genes using DNA from a close, living relative. If that's all Greek to you, don't worry. We'll break it down a bit later. So, the mammoth is one of the animals they plan to bring back, and people are especially hyped about it. These incredible, massive creatures roamed parts of Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America until about 4,000 years ago. Some people might mix them up with modern elephants, but there are some key differences. For starters, they had huge curved tusks that curled inward and were used to dig for food. They also adapted to survive in freezing climates, like having 2 layers of thick fur to keep their blood warm. But mammoths and elephants do have a lot in common. The woolly mammoth shares 99.5% of its genes with its closest relative, the Asian elephant. That's huge because it means that mammoths are genetically closer to Asian elephants than Asian elephants are to African elephants, for example. The company's bold plan is to create a living, walking elephant-mammoth hybrid that looks just like the ones that used to roam the planet. This animal will look like, walk like, and even sound like a woolly mammoth, but most importantly, it'll be able to live in the same ecosystem that the mammoth left behind. If the scientists succeed in bringing back enough of these creatures, one of their big goals is to help restore the Arctic tundra ecosystem. But how do they actually plan to create the mammoth? Here's their plan. First, they need to find well-preserved samples of woolly mammoths in places like Alaska, for example. Then they'll need to sequence the mammoth's genome and the genome of its closest relative, the Asian elephant. The next step is to identify the important genes that made the woolly mammoth perfectly adapted to cold temperatures, like its shaggy hair, curved tusks, and dome-shaped cranium. In other words, they need to identify which genes make the mammoth, well, the mammoth. Now comes the interesting part. They will use top-notch gene editing tools, kind of like scissors, to cut the Asian elephant DNA and replace those spots with the mammoth sequence. This will allow them to create a new cell line and, later, an embryo. This embryo will grow inside a healthy female Asian elephant, who will be the surrogate. And just like that, a new, cold-adapted elephant will be born. Or at least, that's what scientists hope. Specialists predict that this Mammoth 2.0 could be on Earth as early as 2028. The reason it will take a while is that their gestation period is around 22 months. But if that deadline feels too far for you, there is actually a chance we could get a surprise a lot sooner. That's because some of the other animals they plan to revive have a much shorter gestation period, like Australia's thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger. The company is also doing whatever it takes to give this animal a second shot at life. And the good news is that the process seems to be well advanced. Recently, the group announced that the Tasmanian tiger's genome is about 99% complete. This animal was native to the Australian mainland and the islands of Tasmania and New Guinea. A big part of the Tasmanian tiger population disappeared over 3,000 years ago. But about 5,000 of them kept roaming around until pretty recently. It's believed that the last thylacine passed away in 1936. To revive the Tasmanian tiger, scientists first need a sample of the ancient animal. So they took RNA molecules from a 110-year-old preserved head that had been kept in ethanol. The team was really lucky because it's rare to find old samples that are so well preserved, allowing scientists to use advanced DNA analysis techniques. And by that, I mean they did a full, complete analysis. By studying RNA samples from important tissue areas like the tongue, nasal cavity, brain, and eyes, experts were able to learn a bunch of interesting things about the Tasmanian tiger. They could figure out how its brain worked, and also what this beast could smell, see, and taste. By the way, these semi-nocturnal animals had a special appetite for small rodents, lizards, and birds. After finding the perfect sample, the process of reviving it will be pretty much the same as with the mammoth, but with an elephant as a DNA donor, of course. In the case of the Tasmanian tiger, its closest living relative is a small marsupial called the fat-tailed dunnart. Even though this animal is small, it is a ferocious carnivore. So experts believe the whole DNA editing process will work just fine with its sequence. Their goal is to turn a fat-tailed Dunart cell into a thylacine cell. To accomplish that, they did more than 300 unique genetic changes into a Dunart cell. So there is no doubt they're pushing all the boundaries to make the dream of reviving animals a reality. This project also plans to revive the iconic dodo. You know, that funny-looking bird from the paradisiacal island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean? And here, things get a little trickier, since we don't know much about this creature, which has origins that go back about 23 million years. Basically, the only clues we have about what dodos looked like when they were alive come from a handful of drawings, paintings, and written descriptions from the 17th century. But since those pictures are all pretty different from each other, and only a few of them were based on real live dodos, we're still not 100% sure what they actually looked like. And as for how they behaved, well, we don't know much about that either. That's why reviving this long-absent legend will be super interesting and really enlightening. The sample they used to extract an old dodo genome came from a skull in the collection of the Natural History Museum of Denmark. And the dodo's closest living relative, which will provide the host cells, is the Nicobar pigeon, a gray bird with colorful features found in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India. If everything goes smoothly, in a couple of years, we might see the fabulous and iconic dodo with our own eyes. Reviving animals might sound impossible, but science and technology together can be a real game changer, not only by protecting today's animals, but also by restoring species that disappeared from the planet long ago. Actually, we've already pulled this off. A wild goat called the bucardo, also known as the Pyrenean ibex, went extinct in the year 2000. But 3 years later, scientists managed to bring it back to life, using a method pretty similar to what we've talked about in this video. It took 57 tries, but one of them finally worked, and a bucardo clone was born. Unfortunately, the animal only lived for 10 minutes. You might think that wasn't a success, but it was actually a huge step forward in the whole animal revival field. Now, specialists can only hope the project to bring back the dodo, the mammoth, and the Tasmanian tiger go a bit better. When we look at creatures in the animal kingdom, we often have the following thought. If they have similar traits, they must be related somehow. Zebras, horses, and camels must have some common ancestor. Same goes for dogs and jackals. Somewhere back in their lineage, they must have some common great-great-great-grand wolf, right? Well, the way evolution works in nature is way more complex. Take, for instance, convergent evolution, which is when different creatures evolve independently from each other but end up having similar traits. We only need to look at sharks and dolphins to see how this works. At first glance, they look very similar, aquatic creatures with some species having roughly the same size. But turns out they're mostly unrelated. Sharks are fish. They reproduce by laying eggs and evolved to have the ability to sniff out blood in the water to feed themselves. Dolphins, on the other hand, are mammals. They're friendly and have a way more interesting social life. Take bottlenose dolphins, which have their own special whistles that they use similar to how humans use their names. Not only do they develop this type of whistle to introduce themselves to other dolphins, but they can also learn such names so they can better communicate with each other. Sure, sharks and dolphins did have a common ancestor, but this one lived in the sea almost 300 million years ago. It's safe to say, dolphins and sharks aren't even cousins these days. Another more shocking example of convergent evolution is that of whales and bats. Most of the creatures we can name on the top of our heads use light and sight to understand the world around them. But there is a specific set of creatures that relies on sound to paint them a picture of their environment. What they do is they emit a sound which bounces back to them depending on the object it hits. This ability is called echolocation. Animals that have this feature emit sounds at frequencies above human hearing, called ultrasound. Those sound waves bounce off objects while they move around, allowing them to figure out where they are in a certain space. Echolocation is mostly used by toothed whales and by some species of bats. What's similar in both of these animals is that they need to hunt in the darkness. Despite this, they echolocate in very different ways. Bats, for instance, use their throats to generate ultrasound from their mouth or nose. Then, they proceed to listen for changes in the echoes. Their echolocation is so finely tuned that they can distinguish targets less than 0.01 inches apart, even if their target is moving. Whales, on the other hand, echolocate by pushing air through their nasal cavity. This movement creates vibrations in a special fatty organ called the melon. This organ focuses and modulates the sound, which then passes into the water around the whale. Whales then pick up the reflections of these sounds through their lower jaw and around the ears. Another striking example of evolutionary convergence is that of ichthyosaurus and dolphins. Visually, the Mesozoic fish lizards named Ichthyosaurus seem very similar to modern dolphins. But the friendly mammals are much more related to giraffes and camels than the ancient creatures. Despite being 200 million years apart, they do share some common traits which mislead people into thinking they belong to the same species. But that's mostly because they lived in the same environment. They both evolved to feature dorsal fins, which keep them balanced while swimming. Now, let's look at Phytosaurus and crocodiles. The first ones were reptiles that roamed the Earth back in the Triassic period. They weren't dinosaurs, but they lived at the same time as the first dinosaurs did. Even though they look very similar, the first crocodiles popped up more than 70 million years later in the Cretaceous period. These two even fooled paleontologists at first. They initially assumed that phytosaurs were the ancestors of crocodiles. Placodonts and turtles look similar too. Placodonts, however, appeared about the same time as the dinosaurs did, somewhere around 235 million years ago. Like modern turtles, they lived in marine environments, but they were surrounded by predators. So, they evolved to have really strong shells to protect themselves. Turtles, however, made it to the scene around 100 million years later. Even modern cats have ancient lookalikes. They were called the Sparacidons, but they were carnivores and marsupials. They used to live in the South American area and resembled the saber-toothed tiger, which is now extinct. Speaking of saber-toothed tigers, how about one that's also related to the kangaroo? Yeah, this creature used to freely roam the earth around 300 million years ago. The Thylacosmilus may have looked like a feline, but it was a marsupial, meaning it had a pouch of skin in which it carried its pups for a certain period after their birth, like kangaroos and opossums do today. It's difficult to estimate what they looked like since a full skeleton has never been found, but we do know they weighed between 180 to 260 pounds. When we picture a present-day elephant, we always imagine them with their tusks protruding upwards. Well, that's not how their ancestors did it. About 20 million years ago, there lived a prehistoric elephant-like creature named Deinotherium. It did, however, have both tusks curving down from their jaw. As with many other prehistoric creatures, we don't know why they had this feature the other way around. But one theory suggests they used them as anchors. By securing themselves to riverbanks, they were able to safely sleep without drifting off. The last thylacine passed away in the early 20th century. Their extinction was one of the most tragic natural events in modern times. For the last 2,000 years, they have been known to live only on the island of Tasmania. Despite the name, they looked more like foxes than felines. However, thylacines were marsupials rather than placental mammals like foxes. The two-lake wallaby was one of the most beautiful and majestic creatures ever to have lived. It used to be found in Australia and New Zealand. They were very similar to the kangaroos and featured fine fur with shifting bands of darker and lighter gray across their backs. Surprisingly, they were dubbed monkey face, but they had no connection whatsoever to modern monkeys, apart from both being mammals. What made them so special was the way they moved around. Their standard movement consisted of 2 short hops, followed by a long one. After that, the wallaby would simply stare into the sky. Don't be fooled though, the 2-legged wallaby was extremely rapid. Females were generally taller than males, and they appear to have been quite sociable animals, at times being particularly fond of a certain location. They were also nocturnal. Hyracoodonts and horses share a lot of similar features, but hyracoodonts used to exist in the Eocene and Oligocene periods, and they went extinct around 23 million years ago. In their whole group, they featured very diverse species and came in many different sizes, from the small pony-like to the colossal Paraceratherium, which is one of the largest land-living mammals ever to exist. Modern horses, however, appeared around 2 million years ago. Let's do a little experiment together. Start by stretching your arms out. If you were to draw a line from your fingertips to your shoulder, it would measure around 28 inches. Now, try to picture an insect with a wingspan this big. Hold on a minute, you won't need a large can of bug spray, don't worry. They're extinct. But the gigantic Meganeuropsis did live around 250 to 300 million years ago. However, they most likely resembled the present-day dragonflies, despite not being technically related. Scientists figured out that they were not true dragonflies because of differences in the shape of their wing veins. Scientists still don't know why these bugs turned out so big. Some believe insects are limited in size because of the small quantity of oxygen they're able to take in. In the times when these insects roamed the Earth, the levels of oxygen in our atmosphere were much higher, so that might be one explanation. Other specialists think that they got so big because there wasn't any other predator large enough to pick them up from the ground.
Well, it seems we got dinosaurs completely wrong. Plus, the movies created an image of them that's hard to get out of the head now. You know what I'm talking about? Dinosaurs as giant lizards. I mean, lizards are cool. There's a type of lizard found in the streams of Costa Rica that can stay under the water for up to 16 minutes. They create a pocket of air at the top of their snout and breathe exhaled air while submerged. So-called horned lizards can spout blood out of their eyes, shooting it up to 6 feet. Poor lizard has to do it when it gets closer to the mouth of its attacker, since this bad taste makes a predator change their mind and go after some more delicious bites. Then there's the basilisk lizard that can run over water while making its escape from bigger animals in the rainforests of Central America. They can do that for short distances, but still, it gets to rear up and rely on flaps of skin on the toes of its hind legs to have more surface area. Many types of lizards have had to develop such unusual adaptations, so they didn't become an easy, quick snack for snakes, coyotes, hawks, foxes, and other big animals going after them. They wouldn't have to do it if they had some giant cousins that would protect them, like dinosaurs. But even though they look like gigantic, scary lizards in the movies, it's not what you would see if you had the chance to go back to the dino age. You'd have to be aware and run if you saw feathery creatures instead. Feathers don't sound that scary because birds are the only animals alive today that have them. But millions of years ago, it was a different story. Some of the most fearsome dinosaurs were covered in feathers too, of different shapes, sizes, and colors. For example, check this fella, a cousin of the famous T-Rex. It was a scary predator that weighed 1.5 tons and was covered in a shaggy coat of filaments, known as protofeathers. These feathers were not used for flying, but to stay warm or attract mates. Or take a velociraptor, for example. For so long, we've believed it's a sleek predator with the skin of a lizard. But it turns out it was a much smaller, colorful creature covered in feathers, like some sort of bird. Many of their dino relatives had pretty long feathers all over their forearms, together with downy feathers that were spread across the rest of the body. This works for most of the meat-eating dinosaurs, or so-called theropods. There were tiny ones with a tail fan full of feathers, or those with shiny feathers in a mix of colors. It was similar to a hummingbird. Maybe it wouldn't be that scary to face dinosaurs after all. Some of the fossils researchers found are well preserved. In combination with modern techniques they used to study these fascinating creatures, they found out dinosaurs came in different colors. Archaeologists found some fossilized feathers together with fossils of melanosome structures. Those are pigments that gave them gray, brown, and black colors, like Anchiornis, whose body was almost entirely black. It's reminiscent of a bird with wings and fluffy tail feathers on his hind legs, together with a pretty long tail that could fan out. This fella had white stripes along its wings, too. It also had a brown head crest. This one was perhaps there as a display or used to communicate with other Anchiornis dinosaurs. And check out this one. It also had a bristly tail and different markings on its body. Thanks to the fossils they found, researchers have been able to reconstruct the appearance of this dinosaur, giving it so many details. Not only did dinos look like birds, but they also behave similarly to them. For example, they sat on their nests to protect their eggs and most likely used their feathers for displays. There was a discovery in Canada that revealed one type of dinosaur had a fleshy crest on its head, like a rooster's comb. Scientists think this crest was likely used as a way to attract a mate or show off to other dinosaurs. Then there's the scariest of them all in the dinosaur kingdom, the T-Rex. Can you imagine this one in a birdie version? Also, you may have seen pictures of T-Rex with its big sharp teeth and its jaws wide open, kind of always ready to bite into its prey. But these images might be completely wrong. Some recent research tells us these top predators might have had something that we take for granted in almost all land animals today: lips. Now think about it. When you look at a crocodile or an alligator, you don't see any lips covering their teeth. So everyone has always assumed that their prehistoric relatives, theropod dinosaurs, were the same way. Well, not quite. Researchers looked at fossilized dinosaur skulls and compared them to modern reptiles, and found out these dinosaurs likely had soft tissue around their mouths that functioned like lips. Scientists learned this while studying small passageways in the upper jaws of dinosaur skulls, something called foramina. Foramina allows blood vessels and nerves to reach the soft tissues around the mouth. In lipped reptiles like lizards, these foramina are arranged in a line along the edge of the jaw near the teeth. Scientists examine the enamel of the teeth too. When enamel dries out, it wears down more easily. The researchers found that the side of alligator teeth that is continuously exposed erodes more like the wetter side facing the inside of the mouth. However, in theropods like T-Rex, the teeth have an even wear pattern. This tells us teeth were kept covered and moist. Based on this, scientists believe theropods with long, sharp teeth, like T-Rex, could also close their mouths with their teeth inside. The teeth of theropods and monitor lizards are similar in size, and monitor lizards can close their mouths completely. Therefore, it's likely that theropods also had lips that allowed them to fully close their mouths. However, it's not known if they wore lipstick. Interestingly, the study also revealed a neat row of jaw foramina in a pretty cool extinct early cousin of crocodilians. Also, lips may have been present in the earliest archosaurs, a group of reptiles that gave rise to dinosaurs and crocodilians. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but it truly changes how we think about how these dinosaurs ate. If they had lips, it's possible that they could have controlled their bites more precisely, and maybe even chewed their food instead of just tearing it apart. Some still believe differently, saying T-Rex and other theropods had flat scales like crocodiles, all the way down to the edges of their jaws. So I guess the mystery of dinosaur lips continues. Now you might be wondering, did sauropod dinosaurs like the titanosaur have feathers too? Some scientists believe all dinosaurs, including sauropods, had feathers. Just as you can see all mammals have at least some hair. But big mammals, like elephants, have limited hair. So it's possible that sauropods didn't have many feathers. Since feathers are something you'll stumble upon in a fossilized shape, the chances of finding those of sauropods or similar dinosaurs are definitely lower. Plus, there's a chance big dinosaurs that lived in warm weather didn't have feathers at all. Many of these feathered dinosaur fossils have been found in China. These fossils have helped us understand the transition from feathered dinosaurs to birds. Because birds could be the only animals that survived and are around today that are directly related to dinosaurs. Ooh, I wonder what happened here. It could be that some kinds of theropods started hiding in trees more while searching for food and protection, so their bodies evolved to become even smaller to survive harsh conditions and dangerous predators lurking after them. But still, it's a transition from the most incredible predator the animal kingdom has seen to squawking chickens. Talk about how evolution mostly moves animals forward. Hey, stop it! I didn't mean it.